Yeah, recently I spent some time with a dear friend, an old friend, go back over 50 years, and she's been with me in my heart for every single one of those 52 years, and we always haven't seen eye to eye. We haven't always seen eye to eye, but when a friend is a friend, that's not a necessity. That's not a necessity. It could be a bonus, maybe. The joy of that, those places where you do see eye to eye. And maybe just accepting each other as a friend is the greatest eye to eye that can be accomplished. But we spent some time, and she's a little younger than I am. Not much. I'm 73, she's whatever. And I know, we've both been through our things with the things we believe and the things we're convinced are true. And I've come to see things a certain way, and I'm rather unashamed about it, that Jesus is indeed the Lord, speaks the truth all the time, and is actually reigning and ruling right now in every situation and circumstance. But there are those that I've known that at times have had a brush with that or some experience of that and then questioned it later or whatever. They've some of them have even, I've had dear friends that I've met. I met them in their atheist phase, but they've told me they used to be Christian or they used to be believers, but now they're atheists. Something has disabused them of what they thought is the faith or what they call the faith. I can't judge their experience for sure, but they're sure now that, or they were last time I spoke to them, that most of what they're hearing from people calling themselves Christians is bunk. But anyway, and the Lord's dealing with me and things that I've learned while in the Lord. I can't always say I've learned it from the Lord. There are things I'm more convinced I have learned of the Lord from the Lord. But there are things you see, while you're in the Lord and are convinced in some way that they're true. But, the fear of presumption or the caution of being presumptuous keeps you from saying, well, this is what the Lord showed me or this is what the Lord taught me. And, if there is any compassion, any mercy toward those that are seemingly atheist or agnostic about faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and there should be. Compassion and mercy are never out of favor with the Lord. You can never be too compassionate or too merciful. Oh, there's no such thing. And I'm not talking about compromise. I'm not talking about equivocating. But mercy and compassion mean a great deal to the Lord Jesus Christ. Those matters drove him to places that we know little of. But we have touched in part and been convinced of being real. So anyway, in talking to her, I had hoped to engage further, but we got as far as we did, And this matter, I've discussed it before. It's nothing new if anybody's seen any of my videos or read anything that I've written, but that's immaterial. But the thing is, the question of reality and what is real, and the quandary, if you will, of so many of my atheist friends, in the age of so-called science and what science has shown, and science has shown that certain things can't be the way they're expressed in the Bible, can't be the way they're described in the Bible, that reality has an entirely different form, or the material universe is entirely formed differently than once thought, and that was primitive and superstitious, and that was just ignorant men surveying what they thought they knew, and came up with all sorts of explanations and superstitious suppositions about who and what had done it, or is doing it. And so, the very well-educated among them, they do have some difficulties. And bless them. They must have difficulties. Yeah. Because this matter of what is real, is ultimately the question. What is real? Is this coffee cup real? I can touch it. I can tap it, And this is part of the discussion I had with this beautiful friend, This is real, right? This is, we can touch this. What we can't touch or sense, we can even do, can't do a scratch and sniff, but there's a little coffee left in here. We can not only tap on it, we can, oh yeah. And some of you probably are even recalling what coffee smells like as I do that. Consciousness has a weird way of interacting with one another. Other conscious beings interacting with other conscious beings. And so that was basically it. But the question was, are thoughts real? Is consciousness real? Is it a real thing? We're convinced we can exchange all day about this or whatever. This thing here, this cup, this straw, this Gatorade kind of stuff. Yeah, real. It's got real composition, real material substance. And finally, I know she thought about it because she did say yes. And I remember she did. It wasn't even like she was addressing me. I think she was addressing herself. Thoughts are real. Consciousness is real. Consciousness is real. And so the question really is not whether this is real as, or whether consciousness is real the way this thing is real. The question really is more rightly, is this thing real or as real as consciousness is? See, that's the true question, because that's all we have to know anything about this being real. We start from consciousness. Your consciousness is more real to you than anything. Now you can go and you can slam a building with a sledgehammer. Oh yeah, that feels real. But all of that deciding of whether it's real or not is based upon the consciousness you have. And the consciousness, therefore, is the real thing. And all this other stuff is subject to the interpretation by the consciousness of its reality. So we find that this matter of relying on the material universe for information becomes a little tricky to a conscious being. Because now this being, has something that it can't really account for. Right? Big Bang or whatever else you want to say. Where did consciousness come from? Well, you're like me, you're stuck using consciousness to try to consider that. You're using the very thing you're trying to investigate it. You're using consciousness to investigate consciousness. And as the eye can't see itself, the matter of consciousness becomes problematic or enigmatic or mysterious, as rightly it should be. A mystery. Because if you do go back to the Big Bang, whatever you go back to origins, even if you say material always was, it's turtles all the way down. It's turtles all the way down. Turtle standing on the back of a turtle, standing on the back of a turtle, standing on the back of a turtle. This matter of consciousness has to enter in somewhere because you're perceiving the turtles. So either consciousness was always there, which, if one says, one may examine that statement if consciousness always has been and is. But if you say consciousness came into being in the material universe, but consciousness itself is not material, then how do you account for a universe or a creation, if you can accept that term, a creation, coming up with something of which it has no substance to begin with? See, and I've said this before, If you take the Big Bang, you want to take the Big Bang, you want to take that teaspoon of all matter, how it's described, so super condensed and super dense and super whatever, and then it reaching singularity and I think that's what the term they use, and then becoming all that we see, touch, feel, know, even energy, okay, even energy. But this cup was there. The molecules of this cup have always been there. Now, of course, they weren't arranged as a cup in the Big Bang. There was no Parker's Market coffee cup floating through space. Well, it could have been, but God knows. But you understand what I'm saying. So all of these molecules, all the things we see, my Dodge truck that I'm sitting in, right, my glasses, all of this stuff, was there. Now, in this form, the form was potential, but the stuff was there. The stuff wasn't potentially there. The stuff is there. They're being shaped into glasses is a matter of potential. But the stuff, the atoms, the molecules, all the forces working between them to hold them together, to repel, to do whatever. Dark matter's there, or came to be. Black holes. And if somehow we say, well, consciousness arrived on the scene later from not being there in the beginning, whatever we consider the beginning to be, the bottom turtle, whatever, then the creation came up with something that was not once in the creation. Because consciousness, yeah, if you want to get clever and say, well, there was potential for consciousness, where, how do you see that? How can you suppose that? There was potential for consciousness in the material. Then you see what you're saying. Because if it was there to be formed into what we now consider whatever our refined consciousness, and my goodness, you'll never meet a man who thinks his consciousness is more refined than me. Okay. I know you're not like that. You don't think you're sufficient to yourself to know how to be yourself and everything like that. You know your consciousness is your consciousness is unfailing to you, just like mine. Until it gets upended, twisted, turned, bounced around, and then you find out, oh my goodness, there's a consciousness at work that I didn't know about. I was thinking today how when we first come to awareness of consciousness as children, so much is acceptable because we're just learning, finding out. And I'm here selling corn right now. It looks like somebody's coming to buy some corn. So I'm going to have to interrupt this and come back in a moment. So back, I've said before to those that believe, or addressing those who believe, that one of the great works of the Lord by the cross is to take away things that are unsustainable, things that are not substantial, things that are without foundation. And even in that, this matter of consciousness and reality and what reality is, the Lord's dealing with. Not to the end of just shaming us, but things that we assume as a prioris or a prioris, we come to examine and find out there's nothing there. There's nothing there. If I take my stand upon the material, and solely upon the material, and when I say material, I include electrical forces, things called forces, because those of you that are clever enough understand the exchange between matter and energy. And I understand somebody could say, well, consciousness is just a form of energy that we don't understand yet. But then I'm going to have to say, well, if the energy was there at the beginning, in whatever form, be it either material or energy itself, even exchanging into material, then if you say consciousness has always been there, you realize what you're saying. I hope that a consciousness has always been there. Now I realize this goes nowhere to any Well, I shouldn't say that. Any proposition of the Lord's death and life on your behalf, but it really does. You see, because as God does remove these things, and I'm not equating myself with God, but you have to do the investigating, if you care to, with your own consciousness. That once that's removed, upon what does a man stand? If he finds there's a consciousness that is not his, but that is. And how is he reconciled to that? And is there a consciousness overall to be reconciled to? And for that, he may well be brought to consider the many errors committed in the presumption of the rightness of his consciousness, thinking it was all there is to him, and all there is or was to him by which to measure and to judge. But when confronting this greater consciousness, the benefit, the necessity of there being a mediator, one understanding both, and how he is seen and revealed and known as that mediator by his work of sacrifice to be that, can become very important. It's all that is of all. And I do have to say, not in deference, that's not the word, but in consideration of my brother atheists, in being around you and exchanging with you and considering matters with you, sometimes opposing you, sometimes able to receive easily the things you say, that I do sense an awareness often that this matter of God, which seems kind of casual perhaps to you, of those who say they believe in God, but don't quite grasp how upsetting of the apple cart that would have to be. Some of you seem to understand. Even in the most intuitive place that you may not understand, but it comes out. That this is the ultimate matter of all matters. And that everything changes according to the conclusion of it. And I understand if there's a drawing back. I understand if there's even a reluctance to explore whether it could be true, because then all bets are off. Everything changes. And everything is unknown at that point. Except that you know everything is not as it seems. Everything is not as you once thought it was. Everything is not as the way you would consider it in your own consciousness. So I do understand to some extent, because it's no different from me or any of my brothers in the flesh. Any of the brothers that are so-called Christians, or Christians, if you will. I say so-called because the word has become almost useless. But I say, my brethren who are believers also are walking in a place they do not know. They're finding out. And though at times we may speak presumptuously, and we may speak even condescendingly, New life is new to everyone who possesses it by the grace of God, who is given it by the grace of God. And though it sounds like a stumbling through, which of course never has the appearance of anything anybody would want, just stumbling through. It looks a rather foolish approach. But it's not. It's a placing one foot in front of the other and walking in the place not known to you. But in the confidence that only God can give. Because you've had confidence in everything else removed by His grace. And even by the work of that cross. That your standing can only be in one place. Nothing of yourself. Nothing of your wisdom. Nothing of your stature. Nothing of your station. Nothing of your title. Nothing even of your declared faith. That unless someone else is directing you, there's no cause for hope. But there is. I love the way Shakespeare put it. There's a divinity that shapes our ends. Rough hew them how we will. And we make broad and terrible cuts. And yet, faithful is the shaper. I love you, my friend, and the time we spent together. You be blessed.